Hello everyone. In this video we're going to be talking about the events that happened to Abraham Lincoln after he got assassinated. This video draws from the events that happened on April 14, 1865. John Wilkes Booth had already previously tried murdering Lincoln many times. In his mind, Abraham Lincoln, like Caesar, had too much power in the United States and that needed to be stopped. Booth saw the perfect opportunity to kill Abraham Lincoln when he found out that Lincoln would be watching a play at Ford's Theater that night. Booth had his eyes on Lincoln specifically because of what he stood for. Lincoln was a radical president, and Booth couldn't fathom someone like that representing his country in office. What's even more interesting about this event is that weeks before it even happened, Lincoln was awakened one night by a nightmare. He describes the dream as him being assassinated and, quote, as if a number of people were weeping, end quote. Later that night on the 14th, Booth managed to find his way to Lincoln's balcony at the play. Booth wedged a piece of wood in the door so that no one would be able to escape. From there, he pulled out his pistol, aiming point blank at the back of Lincoln's head. He took a deep breath and then he shot him. Since the back of Lincoln's head was completely exposed, that's where Booth shot him. The bullet went through Lincoln's brain and then became lodged under his right eye. Luckily, there was a doctor in the audience, Dr. Charles Lyell, and he immediately went up to the box. He determined that the bullet went through his left ear and got lodged under his eye. However, Lincoln's body was paralyzed and he was barely breathing. Booth immediately jumped from the balcony and he broke his leg, but he did escape. He was found and shot about 2 weeks later. But the next day on April 15, 1865, Lincoln died about 9 hours after the gunshot wound. Following his death and some investigation, they began to prepare his body for his funeral. Egyptians were the first ones to have a process to embalm a body. The first thing they do is the removal of the brain. The skull is then repacked with resin. The second thing they do is evisceration. Essentially, all of the internal organs are taken out and they are replaced with fluids. The third step is an immersion in natron or sodium salt. The body stays in this solution for 20 to 70 days. The fourth step is dehydration. The body is cleansed, straightened, and allowed to dehydrate in the sun. The last step being wrapping the body in bandages and then placing the body in a sarcophagus. Dr. Thomas Holmes is considered to be the father of modern embalming. He experimented with preservative chemicals while working as a coroner. By using arsenic and formaldehyde, he is able to slow down the decomposition of a body, and it's made easier to handle while prepping for a funeral. An incision is made in the collarbone, and from there tubes are put in. The tubes are filled with the solution and they cycle out all of the blood, and by getting the blood out of the body, this slows down decomposition. Dr. Holmes reportedly embalmed over 4,000 soldiers in the U.S. Civil War, and this is what made it gain in popularity. Bodies were identifiable for a slightly longer period of time due to their ability to not break down as fast. American families would wash down a body and put out candles during their funeral to hide the smell of decomposition, but Dr. Holmes was selling arsenic for $3 and teaching people how to perform embalming so that people could preserve their bodies for the funerals. Since Lincoln's body was now embalmed, he was able to go on a 21-day trip around the United States in his funeral train. Over the course of the 21 days that Lincoln's body was being toured, the weather was frequently rainy, which represented the mood that America was feeling. During the 21 days, Lincoln's body traveled from the White House to Springfield, Illinois. His casket stopped in 10 cities, but there were over 180 train stops on the route, and nearly 2 million Americans had the opportunity to see the face of Lincoln before he was put to rest. Nearly 7 million at the time were able to claim that they saw the train that was holding the deceased president. Even made his way up to Albany, New York. He generally stayed away from the South due to tensions that would arise. Also on the train was the coffin containing the body of Lincoln's son Willie, who had died in 1862 at the age of 11 due to typhoid fever. Willie's body had been disinterred from a plot in Washington, D.C. and was put on the train to be buried with his father, the President of the United States. What's interesting is that Lincoln's grave has been moved and opened a few times over the years, so on September 26, 1901, it had to be opened just to identify that the president was still there. This event was the start of a tradition for some presidential funerals. In modern times, presidential funerals are extravagant celebrations of life. One interesting fact is that all recent deceased presidents, which include Kennedy, Reagan, and H.W. Bush, all have nearly identical caskets. Every presidential funeral has bouquets upon bouquets of beautiful flowers. The military leads a procession, and there's a 21 cannon salute. Even the pedestal that the casket sits on has been passed down and is a tradition. Lincoln had a powerful effect on the world and how we see many things today, both politics-wise or even how people get involved. Upon leaving the earth, his legacy created a state where all men of all parties came together with a common interest and a common grief, and they stood together and supported him and the nation as a whole. No president in history overcame any bigger crisis. What better way to end it all than to tour the country? He forever changed.